Recently, I've been stuck in a place of wondering. That time when I've made a decision to walk away from what was, but I don't know what will be. And therefore, I'm in this space of kind of influx, this hallway, maybe. If you were to think about the idea of one room and another room, the room you were in and the room you're going to, then I'm standing in the door frame, not whether in or out of either room, but in a kind of in a transitive area, a transitive space. And maybe you're in that place too, because you've seen where things are coming from and you don't want to be a part of that, and you're seeing where you need to go but can't see it, and you're stuck in this place of questions. Well, don't think that it's weird. It's called liminal space. And although it's used in architecture, photography, in different places inside the mind, inside reality, inside places and spaces, it's still yet simply defined as the liminal space is that space between what was and what is next, a place of transition, a season of waiting and not knowing. If you knew exactly where you were going, then you wouldn't be in transition. You wouldn't be in liminal space. You would just transcend from what was to what is. But in this place, in this time, when you're standing in a place when you don't know how it's going to play out, and you're just kind of waiting, knowing that the was can't be that way, and the is coming soon but doesn't have a definition. Well, how do you handle that? Where do you come from that? Well, I want to show you 3 places in the Bible where liminal space is really key into the spiritual development of its character. See, God works inside liminal space to make the most of our growing. Because when we have questions, we must seek answers. And the only person to seek an answer of is the only one who's already been there, the one that knows the end from the beginning. And that's God himself. I'm standing in this liminal space knowing that what was cannot ever be again, and what is coming will be tremendously blessed, but I'm in the middle of a spiritual winter, and I'm waiting for God's calling to help me get to that place. Well, the first one I want to show you is Jesus, and in Mark chapter 3, he's standing in the synagogue on a Sabbath, on a Saturday, the holy day, and there's all kinds of rules about what you can and can't do on the Sabbath. It says, verse 1 of chapter 3, and he, being Jesus, entered the synagogue again, and a man was there with a withered hand. And so they watched him closely, whether he would heal him on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him. And he said to the man who had the withered hand, "Step forward." And then he said to them, "Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill?" But they kept silent. So Jesus walks into the synagogue, and Jesus always caused just a little bit of trouble with the religious leaders because they were there to enforce Judaic law, which said you can't do anything on the Sabbath. Now, Sabbath is very specifically defined in the Bible, but they had taken the idea of the Sabbath and had blown it out of proportion because they needed to make sure they felt as though they were doing God's work. They didn't want God to legitimately turn on them and then send them into captivity, as had happened in the Old Testament. And so they had already taken the law that God had made and then had super hyped it up to 613 different rules from 10 plus some pieces of it, so that they would make sure that they wouldn't transgress the law of God. And Jesus knows this, and Jesus knows the hearts of these guys. And so he stands here, he finds this man in need, a man with a deformed hand. Now, we don't know how he got it deformed, whether it was born that way or it was a farming accident or whatever, but we know that it doesn't work. And he's standing in the synagogue on the Sabbath. Jesus says, look, tells this man, come forward. And now the man is standing in liminal space. He has what was his hand, his deformed hand of all time. And now he's been asked to stand up on a Sabbath in front of everybody by the Creator, by the healer of the world, Jesus Christ. And he's now in a place between what was and what could be, depending on what he does next. And when Jesus had looked around on them with anger, being grieved by the hardness of their hearts, he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." There is the instruction of God. And now the liminal space means something tremendous, because how much will this man grow? Well, the definition inside this liminal space is how long it takes him to say, okay, I'm going to step outside of what my fears and worries about being judged by these guys in the synagogue are. Am I taking this guy at his word? If I stretch my broken hand out and it doesn't do anything, I'm made to look like a fool that I went along with a man who tried to heal me on the Sabbath, which is against the law, and Judaism will take me out. I'll get kicked out of the synagogue. But at the same time, if I have faith in the grace of Jesus, that I have known what he's doing, and I do by faith reach out my hand, and he heals it, well, I may be kicked out of the synagogue, but now I have two healthy hands. And what was is now not what is. What is now something far more glorious. Well, what happens? Stretch out your hand, and he stretched it out, and his hand was restored as whole as the other. And then the Pharisees went out and immediately plotted with the Herodians against him, how they might destroy him, how they might destroy Jesus. Because it was always Jesus. Jesus was always the ire of these guys, because he did things that were against the law, against the Judaistic law. It wasn't against the biblical law. Jesus wrote the law. He is the law. He's the Word of God. But don't miss the point here of this guy. He's standing in a place where he knew what was, he longs for something better, and he's now standing in a place of testing. Does he, by faith, reach out his hand? And how long does it take for him to say, okay, I will? Jesus blesses him. He gets a new hand. He gets a new life. Now he can work again, full-handed and full of everything. You know that in our times of liminal space, we learn and grow, and we are changed for the better if we use it by faith. Well, in the Old Testament, Elijah is kind of facing something similar. He is now gone up on Carmel, and he has proven that God is real in front of all of these people. He has set up an altar. They had called the altar to call their own gods to deal with this issue. They have failed, and God comes down and makes himself miraculously known. And all of Israel in this place, this area up on Mount Carmel, believe in God. And so Elijah has executed the priests of the false idols, the idolatry, Baal. Well, the queen takes very big offense to this, and she says, as we look at chapter 19 of 1 Kings, Elijah now has to run away. It says, 19 verse 1, and Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, also how he had executed all the prophets with the sword. And then Jezebel sent a message to Elijah saying, so let the gods do to me and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of the ones them by tomorrow about this time. And when he saw that, he arose and ran for his life and went to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a broom tree. And he prayed that he might die. And he said, is it enough? It is enough. Now, Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my fathers. And then, as he lay and slept under a broom tree, suddenly an angel touched him and said to him, arise and eat. And then he looked, and there by his head was a cake baked on coals and a jar of water. And so he ate and drank, and he lay down again. And the angel of the Lord came back the second time, and he touched him, and he said, arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you. So he arose and ate and drank, and he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights, as far as Horeb, the mountain of God. And there he went into a cave, and he spent the night in the place. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, and he said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? And so he said, I have been very zealous for the Lord of gods of hosts. For the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with a sword. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life. Elijah stands upon the mountain, the Mount Carmel. He has a heavenly experience. He stands up, he stands in faith. God proves himself, and wonderful things happen. He works in God's work, and he kills all these prophets, and Israel has been saved again as they turn back to God. Wow, what a tremendous. Even if you are just doing this with one person, if you had evangelized one person and they had come to the Lord, or you had bent over backwards at work to do something for someone in need in the name of Jesus, and that has brought you great power and great happiness. But we always know that the enemy has to come against us. He has to oppose us. When we do something for the Lord, the enemy knows he can't touch the Lord. He has to come against us. And so Ahab and Jezebel are both wicked a king and a queen. Neither follow God; they follow their own gods. And so Jezebel wants to kill Elijah, and he gets word out there, and Elijah runs. Now Elijah's in the liminal space. He goes from that mountaintop experience, doing work for God, being a rock star in the area, being a prophet, God talking to him, doing all these great things, to now seeking after, running for his life because someone wants to kill him. And now he doesn't know. He knows what was but can't be there. He doesn't know what's coming but knows there's a destination, and he's stuck in the middle of indecision and a failure to understand. And it makes him depressed. And so he lays down at this broom tree and he tells God to take his life. He just wants to die because he just doesn't know what's coming, and he's fearful. But the angel here tells him to arise and eat. He wakes him up, he gives him some food and water, and he says, get up and eat. Do a normal thing. Do the next thing. And do the next thing faithfully. Well, he eats, drinks, takes another nap, gets up again, more food. The angel says, look, you can't make this on your own. You cannot make this journey on your own. Eat and drink and know that I'm with you. Walk. And he eats a couple pieces of bread and a jar of water, and he goes for 40 days on the strength of that food. In the midst of that 40-day walk, he now knows what's coming. He knows what's in the past. This wilderness journey of not knowing what's in the future grows him greatly. And by the time he gets to the cave where God meets with him, he says, well, look, I've been zealous. I've been doing your work, Lord. I don't understand. Why is it that everybody wants that? All the prophets are being killed, and they want me too. And God lays out in the next part of the chapter, he lays out the plan. That God had already had a plan. He knew that all of this was going to fall down. He even tells him, Jezebel and Ahab, they've got their day coming. They've got their day, and I know that appointed time. But you need to go back, appoint another prophet. I need you to anoint a king and be ready, because your work here is done. I'm going to come and take you away. And what do we find out in the next chapter or two? That Elijah is taken up like the rapture in a whirlwind of fire. He doesn't die. He has more to do later than he ever did in this chapter and these chapters in 1 Kings, because he is the prophet that comes back at the end days. Him and Moses, he showed up with Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration. The testing inside that liminal space became so dramatic in his life that he's being used by God in amazing, amazing ways. Elijah was seen as the greatest prophet in the Bible, other than Moses. Realize when you're in liminal space, you know what's happened, and maybe it's a bad thing, maybe it's a tough thing, and you're getting away with it. It's something that I know the past, and I can't go back there. The Lord has not been gracious to heal my body to do so, and so I need to look to the future. It's a hard part of this whole thing, because for 18 years, I've done what's in the past. I can't go back there. Therefore, I have to look to the future and the unknown. I am in liminal space when I don't know the outcome, but I know that the Lord has called me into this space. He's been teaching and molding me in a time of spiritual, sort of a spiritual winter. The final story I want to tell you about is found in Matthew, and this is the key point. Liminal space is we don't know how long liminal space can be. So if you're hanging out into it for a long time, it may become drudgery, and it may become afraid. You may not see the goodness of God right away. You may not see it, but you have to realize that God's hand is in appointed time. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's already there. He's already talking to you in the situation down there. You just haven't got there yet because we live inside of time. Well, here are the apostles. They're rowing in a boat. They're in a windstorm. The storm is tempestuous. It's dangerous, and all these guys are afraid. It says, immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. By the way, this is Matthew chapter 14. Verse 23, and when he sent the multitudes away, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. And now, then evening came, he was alone there. But the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, and for the wind was contrary. And now in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them, walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, it is a ghost. And they cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, be of good cheer, it is I, do not be afraid. So after feeding 5,000 people, 5,000 men, really 15 to 20,000 people, Jesus sends the disciples into a boat, and they go out into this really rough sea. Now, these guys are fishermen. They're professional fishermen. They've been on the Sea of Galilee all their life. They understand the weather, but this one becomes tempestuous. This windstorm in at 3 a.m., they've been rowing, they can't get anywhere, they're lost in this place, the boat's not going anywhere, it's blowing over, it's filling with water, they're afraid. Well, in the middle of the night, in the middle of the darkness, and we've talked about darkness before, when you are in darkness, you don't have all the answers. Darkness, illumination is wisdom. Illumination is light. It is to allow us to see what's coming, but these guys are in the middle of the sea, in the middle of the night, in the middle of a windstorm, and they're struggling. And now Jesus is walking on the water, and they take him for a ghost. They haven't seen him do this before. But he calls out to them, and he says, be of good cheer. Well, now they're in the middle of what was. What was when the boat started out, everything was okay after doing something amazing and feeding all these people. Well, the enemy comes against them again, and it is believed that the enemy brought on this storm. So now they're in the middle of this dangerous situation. They don't see what was anymore because now their eyes are fixed on what's going on, the dangers of what's happening. Well, if that's happening, then why? So they're afraid because there's no questions. They don't have any answers. They don't know what's going on. And here we are standing in the place where unfortunately you just can't go back. And unfortunately you're in a time of difficulty and indecision, a time of testing, a time of you got to build your faith in this one. You don't know how it's going to turn out. And there's Jesus standing there. I'm telling you, Jesus is always standing there. The question is do you see him? But Peter acts kind of interestingly here. Look at verse 28. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it is of you, command me to come to you on the water. And so he said, come. And when Peter came down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him. And he said to him, O you of little faith, why do you doubt? And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. And then those who were in the boat came and worshipped him, saying, truly you are the Son of God. Peter says, I'm in this place I don't like. Now, I know who you've proven to be, and Peter has always been most outspoken guy in all of this. And so he says, Lord, if this is of you, command me to step out of the boat onto the water and come to you. Jesus is standing on the water. Peter is in a boat that is in a perilous situation. Peter knows that Jesus might be able to do this, but he asks, and that's a good thing, because when we're in a dark place and we don't have the answers and we don't know, and we're in liminal space growing and we're being tested by our faith in a time when we don't understand, it's best to ask Jesus. Don't be afraid to pray and ask him. If what is now starting to happen becomes more like you, it becomes that answer to yourself. then it's of you. It's of him, and you need to go to him. If it's just of you and he's not in it, he'll make that plainly too. So Peter's standing in his boat, knowing he can't stay in the boat, knowing he wants to go to what Jesus is, because we want to be in Jesus's perfect will. And when he asks, is this of you? Command me to step out onto the water. Jesus then answers, come. The liminal space here is the idea that Peter is now knows he can't stay where he is. He wants to be in the perfect will of God, and he's waiting for the call. And so he offers up his willingness to do something different, to absolutely, by faith, step out onto a roaring sea. Don't miss this. Peter gets a lot of grief for not believing here. Oh, he didn't have any faith. Consider the fact he's the only guy who got out of the boat, and he's the only other man on history of all time who walked on water. Jesus and Peter both did. And so Jesus says, come. And he walks on the water to Jesus. Now he gets caught up in what's going on here. He throws up a little prayer and Jesus saves him. There's a lot of growth in this situation, in this story, because stepping out into the unknown, into the dark and boisterous sea to chase Jesus can be a daunting situation. The liminal space can be incredibly uncomfortable but exciting at the same time, because if you step out there and you are part of God's perfect will, then holy cow, how wonderful the blessings will be. And this is what I wait for. And so I find myself not being able to go back, standing in liminal space, waiting to get through the next door and into the next part of my life. I have told Jesus that I'm done this way and that I await his call. My phone lines are open, but I stand in the boat and await for the opportunity for him to call me on the water. Jesus, if this is of you, call me. And then I wait. And when Jesus says, come, I, by faith, step out into the boat. I hope this understanding of liminal space helps, because there's a lot of things going on that are forcing us in law enforcement, forcing us in all kinds of different vocations and stuff as the world is kind of turning, that we've got to make some decisions. And those decisions have one of two places. Either you or Jesus makes that decision for you. What do you rather to be? Use the liminal space wisely and grow in your grace. Grow in the fact that Jesus wants to bring you to a new place. Grow in the idea that being in the Word and praying and meditating and understanding what his plan is for you will grow that liminal space, will shorten the time that you are willing to stay in liminal space, and you will answer the call of God when he calls. Are you waiting for that phone call? And do you know what he's asking to say? Bear with the liminal space. Blessing is just around the corner. Blessings.